I've spoken at games conferences and games schools, and I've talked to them about future hybrid game films. And I've talked to a lot of film students about this as well, and filmmakers.
Yeah.
And a lot of them think I'm totally crazy. But
Right.
I mean, what do you think? I mean, 5 years down the track, do you think there will be some forms which is somewhere between what we know now as films and as games?
Well, you'd have to say it certainly is in the air, and it's in the air for a couple of reasons. I think it's more important when you look at, say, for example, television. Television was a dominant medium for kids to watch. That's what they did. That's over. That has ended. They don't do that. They interact. They're playing the games that we've been talking about. They're interacting with each other. They're texting. They're downloading. They're doing 25,000 things at the same time, all over that. So if you look, and in terms of film, I'm not even sure. They may go see the big blockbusters when they come out, but I'm not sure they're turning into, what's the word, cineasts, lovers of cinema, as most of us have grown up to be and from. So that said, that's why people are thinking, is there something that's going to mesh these two worlds? And the easy answer, which I'll give first, is we don't know, so we should be exploring the possibilities. I'm absorbed right now in the world of Walt Disney because I've been reading his biography by Neil Gabler. And what's fascinating about that is he essentially, working with tremendously creative people, but his force of will and vision, imagination, brought this to a new art form. People said no one's going to sit there for 80 minutes and watch animated characters. No one's going to get touched when an anime character is incarcerated in a glass tube. So in a way, we should be in a position where, well, we know what games are, very successful. Halo 3 comes out. I think it outsold Spider-Man 3 for the week. Tremendous amounts of money. And we know that films work, though even that's become something where you have the blockbuster mentality, the film you have to see, because theoretically you have to see it. And television less so these days. It's probably the most, of those three, it's probably the rockiest medium. We should, the places that should be exploring paradigms, testing ideas, and I believe, from what I've seen, and also from work I'm doing, some of which I can talk about, some of which I can't talk about, I believe there may be new models that will provide that new mesh of medium, whatever you want to call it.
So a screenwriter who's studied at a film school, who is very versed in writing for linear media,
right?
How useful is that, a person trained in that way, in the games industry?
Well, I mean, that's really a great question, because the talent and skill, say the person's good, and really is actually a good screen, is exactly what is needed in terms of not only the building world and story, but character creation and dialogue in film. Game characters often amazingly one-dimensional. If you were to ask, what are the problems they have besides getting to the fortress, they go, I don't know. And every screener would say, well, of course he has problems. He's behind his alimony payments. His brother's going in for an operation. There's these other real-life concerns that deepen and broaden the person. So there's this tremendous skill set that should be brought over to games, but currently I don't think there's a way to sort of mesh that, because if the person, he or she's in film school studying that, it's probably going to pretty much staying in film, not getting exposed to, let's look at some multimedia scripts. Do you think you could do better than that? What's wrong with this script? Let's look at this game. What are the problems that you could solve? So in a way, a new individual has to be formed. You have to boil up lead or gold and pour it into a mold to create a new kind of person, someone who really is a talented storyteller, writer, scripter, because I think all these media depend upon story, but understands the new and novel needs of interactive. And what that mesh can be, I think there's a couple of different possibilities, and hopefully in the next 5 years, I know at least one or two entities that do have things planned, so we'll see.
So we're talking about hybrid people as well, or people with more diverse skill sets, rather than working just for one platform, you'd say?
Yeah, I mean, going back to animation, and I'm just doing this because it's the most current reference I have, They didn't really use writers to write cartoons. They had guys who did they had cartoonists who did gags, slipping a banana peel and boom, get bonked by the trolley. It wasn't written, and then all of a sudden there was a need for a person who would actually write these. Now, of course, there were movies being written. Al Jolson, the jazz singer, great, James Cagney doing gangster movies. So we knew how to do scripts, but scripts for cartoons? How is it different? It's going to be very different. So a new type of writer had to be created. And fortunately, because of what happened back then, Walt Disney had the vision, not that I'm touting him, but it was a unique time, to sort of create this think tank, to create that writer. And went to the colleges and recruited people, young, and specifically young, because you don't want to take someone who's so, that's not going to work. A dwarf's going to touch me? Not going to happen. So I think that there's a real opportunity to train writers without taking them away from film or novels or television, to broaden their horizon and have them start thinking of possibilities.
I went to another conference recently and there was a presentation from a games investor. Mm-hmm. And he was saying, look, I'd invest in anything that's tied to a television property, any game that's tied to a television property. Really? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, certainly the Lost experience has game aspects around it. There are 24's done a mobile aspect. You think there'll be more of this? More of this sort of
that'll continue. I mean, the licensing, it's an easy thing because you get a safety net. X number of fans. If you're a CSI fan and you happen to also play games at what level, and the CSI game comes out, so it's a financial safety net, that'll continue to go on. But from your earlier question, what I think you're really asking about is there a mesh of show and game? And that's going to be different than the licensed spin-off of the show. It's going to be something where the experience comes together. And I think there's a couple of ways that should be, that are being looked at that may pay off in that regard.
And with Pirates of the Caribbean, mm-hmm. I'm not sure how much you can talk about it, but
that's out, so I pretty much can talk about everything. Yeah.
Although with the next one, aren't you looking at the game, the writing you've done for the game, informing the next feature film script?
Well, the franchise. There's been 3 films, wildly successful. Some pretty good writing. The screenwriters are great. They also wrote the first Zorro film. They wrote Aladdin. They're very, very talented, funny people. So what would a 4th Pirates film be? Is it still Jack Sparrow? What's that universe? Everything that's gone on. And so, and again, the process is going to be one of sort of building up that world beyond. The first film they might have said, we're just going to make one Pirates film. Then obviously it becomes something larger. So the world is sort of being retrofitted, and with this other Pirates project, the idea would be, okay, now how does that expand outward? What does it say about this universe where there are krakens and there are gold pieces that can turn you into skeletons with curses, and there are funny one-liners all the time, and people speak in ironic terms, and building that out to sort of liaise and sort of set the stage for what might be another film.
Are there many schools, any media schools or game schools that you know of who are doing courses in writing for games?
There are a lot. I haven't investigated them a lot. I know in the States, they're like for Vancouver has a game school. Montreal, there's a game school. Savannah College of Art has a game program, and there's a couple in San Francisco. So maybe this is just in the States. I know of like 24. When I have skimmed the syllabus of what's being offered, programs, majors, often I don't see something saying game writing.
It seems to be an area that's very dominated by the technology and the IT
it is.
side.
And just to put a little pet peeve of mine, if you go to the Game Developers Convention in San Francisco, which is massive, 10,000 people, every game company from the universe showing up, people all, they run all these tracks. They do some game writing, but they do not have a specific game writing track. Tons of technology. Now, obviously, technology is very important to games. But can you imagine doing the same thing with film? Doing a film convention where you're not focused on the stories you're telling and the worlds you're building. That isn't dominant, but that's where it is. Instead, it's, programming in C++ -5, to create world effects so things don't flutter or something. that'd be one panel, which is you don't want to miss. But I think that ultimately would change when the technology gets to a certain base level where you'd say, it's like the film camera, the color film camera, which Technicolor was good enough. We don't have to press this envelope anymore.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Yeah.